Awesome. Thank you, Joanna. Welcome, everybody, to day one of the second annual Grow Where You Are Planted Conference for Military Families, hosted by Military Family Services United States. We're so excited to be back for a second year. And in this time of change and COVID-related virtual programming and so much happening, we thought we would go with a theme of a season of connectivity, because now more than ever being connected is an important part of our lives, but it's been challenged and it's new. It looks a whole lot different than it did a year ago when we all came together for our conference. I have the most excitement this morning in my voice because I'm so excited to welcome Mckissack. She is a dear friend of mine and a former co-worker of mine from Greenwood. And Michelle is a retired social work officer. She's a military spouse and a mom. She also co-owns Clinad Counseling and Consulting Incorporated, which is a growing private practice in Penfield, Nova Scotia. And with over 20 years of clinical experience working predominantly with military members, veterans, and their families, Michelle is a wealth of knowledge for all of us and speaks regularly about trauma and relationships in schools. She does that also with hospitals, private agencies, and community organizations like ours. I love Michelle's mission, and she not only lives it in her business and in her practice, but she lives it in her life. And she says that her mission is to plant seeds of hope in her community by building relationships and leading people to the power of healing held within each and every one of us. And I think just as an individual, but also as a professional, Michelle exudes that. So I'm really thrilled that we can have her here with us today for a second time. So I'm going to hand it over to Miss Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.
We were two of, I think, 3 or 4 by the end of my time working with Michelle Gerald before she posted. There's lots of Michelles in our area.
So many.
It's my pleasure to be back this year and to be having a little bit of a conversation about maybe some of the things that we've experienced over the last year, the journey some of us have been on, and really, you know, when Michelle approached me to talk today and to join the conference this year, I reflected on what I had presented last year, which was a lot about, you know, what transitions are like, and as military families, what happens when we post, that there's a lot of grief, that our need to connect and have relationships is hugely important every time we go somewhere, and often as a military spouse, it's been my job to create those connections. And I thought, wow, that was last year, and this year, what I'm seeing in my clinical practice and in my community is that people's bodies and responses to all of the things happening around us right now is actually kind of getting in the way sometimes of the very thing we need. And so I had been contemplating which aspect of that I wanted to talk about and which piece I wanted to share today, and kind of came to this place of, I think I'm just going to say it like it is. And I'm hoping that there's an opportunity for you during this time you've carved out for yourself to maybe practice some of the tools that you can take with you to experiment. It's an invitation. There's going to be some information for sure. Some pieces will sound familiar. Some pieces might sound a little different than how you've heard it before. And some pieces might sound a little wacky, and you might wonder, what is she talking about? And that's okay. It would be awesome to get curious today, and that would be my invitation to you. It's really to bring your curiosity as we move through the PowerPoint. I'm not married to things going in exactly the way I have them laid out either, so I'm going to invite conversation, questions. If there are pieces that have popped up for you in your family or in your community that you kind of see or wonder about for yourself, feel free to put those things to the chat. I'm happy to answer questions as we go. Michelle, the other Michelle, and I will do a little bit of a Q&A at the end as well. But feel free, if there's pieces that resonate or you have more questions specifically about, I'm super happy to deviate here and there. I've learned to significantly slow down my pace in teaching this past year. most of us are not quite absorbing at the same rate we were. Our attentions might look a little different than they were before. And so I'm super okay with being flexible. And if there's sort of a resounding, can we take a 5-minute breath, we can do that as well. So feel free to let me know if there's some of those pieces that you'd like to do. Having said that, as we go, if people do share pieces or questions, I would ask that those who are here with us would think about confidentiality as you ask questions. We, protect the names or details that might identify folks, but by all means, pitch your questions if there are things you want to talk about. The other really key piece is, as we're talking about stress, what's been happening in our world, as we begin to sort of try or experiment with some of the tools I'm going to introduce today, I would encourage you to really be mindful of taking care of yourself. Sometimes when we're listening to someone talk, as less so maybe when we're virtually and the sound is muted and the camera is muted, but we kind of hold on for a natural break before we, get up and go pee, or we get a tea or whatever. Really be intentional as we're going through this to take care of yourself. Take a breath if you need it, take your headset off, step away from the computer, do what you need to do to manage however it is that you're feeling or coming here today. All of us are joining this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are, with whatever it is we've got on the go for ourselves. So be mindful to take care of yourself. As Michelle had said, I'm a clinical social worker, and I love my job. I am so lucky to get to do what I love every day, and I do very much have the privilege, because of our practice, to work in a way that's autonomous and suits the way that working in this field feels true to me. So I hope you'll feel that as we go through today as well. The pieces that are really important to me as I've worked in the field of trauma and mental health over the years is this idea that without connection, without people, without relationships, without a sense of relationship even with our own body, we can feel distanced from our own well-being. It can feel like this thing that's out beyond us. And in the last couple of years, I've been doing a really cool training in a modality I hadn't experienced before called Somatic Experiencing that we'll be delving into today. That's really just an exploration of what it feels like on the inside of our bodies. That's really not as scary a place as it might sound. But it's fascinating when we get acquainted and we get comfortable with that, the knowledge our own body has for healing and well-being. And so that's the focus a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. As I was creating the title for today, I had a couple of thoughts. This was one, discover your inner healing power. And I think this is the one I like better, but it maybe doesn't advertise as well.
That's fantastic, Michelle.
Right. It's this idea of, we're constantly told we must thrive. We have to be resilient. We have to bounce. We have to, maintain all of these things. And I don't know about you, but as Brene Brown would say, I have been FFTing since the beginning. Everything has felt like an effing first time for me. And it has been a crap ton of stress, to say the least. And so I have also done the exact same things we are going to talk about today. There is nothing I'm going to ask you to experience or experiment with that I haven't desperately clung on to in the last few months as well to maintain my own sense of self and direction. And it doesn't mean I hang on to it all the time, but they're very much things that I use myself to every day. Oops. Back it up. So the plan, I think we talked about a little bit already, just that we're going to explore a few new ideas, some old ideas, maybe in a new kind of way. And I'm really going to ask you to, again, if there are questions as we go, slow me down. I don't mind. And if we don't get through all the material, super okay as well. So I'm not, as I said, I'm not married to the slides in the order that they're in. A moment of self-compassion can change your entire day, and a string of such moments can change the course of your life. This slide has been a part of my presentations for a number of years, and I don't know if I truly appreciated how deeply that resounds as true until this past year. Without massive self-compassion, I think I would have collapsed in on myself many, many, many months ago. Not that I haven't had moments of massive breakdown over the last few months, but it's been a journey of then being super gentle with myself around what's happening for me. So, in the news, there has been this crazy word that has popped up everywhere, and I don't know about you, but it drives me nuts, this idea of pivoting. And every time I hear it, especially because I'm not just a therapist these days, I'm also a business person, still a hat I struggle to think about wearing, but I do it. This idea of pivoting keeps popping up, that businesses are pivoting, that government is pivoting, that we are all trying to be these flexible, loosey-goosey, go with the flow kind of people, that we are supposed to put ourselves first, that we are supposed to maximize our self-care, that we are supposed to search all of these websites and watch webinars and watch self-help pieces, and all of this stuff has been coming at us. And I've got to a place where I'm glad that you're all here for 2 hours, but my attention span is about 15 minutes if I'm watching something on YouTube or anything else. And, you know, we've been inundated with all of these ideas of what we should be doing. Our should culture continues. And the reality is that many of us are probably feeling more like this. Pass me the ice cream. All the Netflix, and there have been some very good ones, but I've probably watched Gilmore Girls twice over the last few months, the whole thing. Regularly screen my calls. Talking to people feels like a lot of work. I'm freaking tired all the time. I can't concentrate. I'm forgetful. I can't remember where I put my keys. I can't find my, favorite pair of socks. What did I do with my pen? Then there's the squirrel moments of, oh, there's a sale at the Bay. Or, I see some obscure board game on Amazon and, oh, we should have that because, we're all home and why not, right? Or all the sweatpants, the cozy clothes. When I see the trend this year being, comfortable houseware, something has radically shifted in terms of where we are driving our attention. It's all about the comfort. Then there's my poor husband, and if he chews up cereal any louder, I really might have to take him out. And then sometimes I have this complete collapse when I get home from shopping. And it's just going to get a few groceries. But between the mask, the people's anxieties around me, the stress of all the hand sanitizer everywhere, the wiping things down when we get in the house, all these pieces, I've come home, especially at Christmas time when I was shopping around the holidays, I'd come home and I wanted to eat my family alive, just really pissed off, very angry, and desperately needed a nap. There was just this sort of total collapse around that experience. And every time these things happen, it's fodder for me. It's an opportunity to pull it all apart. And every time I hear stories reflected in, the community I connect with, my clients, my colleagues, and they're all sort of the same buzz is happening, I kind of go, okay, well, I'm not alone. So what's happening? What is happening to us that these things are popping up on a regular basis? And how am I supposed to be looking after myself? but what I really want is, just to hide in a hole somewhere? Or how am I supposed to be connecting with people when talking on the phone drains me at the end of the day? There feels like the solutions almost feel like they're overwhelming my system. And I know these things. I do this for a living. I eat, sleep, breathe attachment and relationship. I predominantly work with trauma and know it's everywhere. And so when I start feeling the same symptomology in myself, I go, hey, what is this? What's going on? And why is it so pronounced? And even with that awareness, now how do I get out of my own way to actually feel a little better? What does that look like? This is what's been happening to us. We've been in survival mode. And I use this expression about many of us were living sort of paycheck to paycheck emotionally and massive stress loads even before COVID happened, 2020 happened. I mean, so much more than just COVID. We were carrying probably too much already, or overextended, or just keeping things in check and in balance. And then these huge developments have taken place. And our bodies, man, they are so smart. They are so smart. They know exactly what to do. But when our bodies react in a natural survival kind of way, we get confused, completely frustrated, and all of our very sophisticated management systems kick into play. And I'm going to invite a little bit of chat if I can. I'm going to share a few of those sophisticated management strategies I tend to use. But by all means, take a few minutes, either share in the chat or you can write it down for yourself. Think about what are the coping strategies you find yourself using in the last few months. And they might be things that are super familiar to you. They might be things you haven't actually done since childhood. They might be things that you watched your parents do. They might be things that, your spouse does and you kind of join along. And they might be really kind of new. And whatever they might be, I'm curious what some of those might be looking for you. For me, my sophisticated management system is to shut down. It's to stop reaching out. It's to want to be in an alone space, which, man, that's really hard when everybody's working from home and there's kids at home and all the things. More than once I've wanted to run away to some secluded cabin somewhere. And not that that still doesn't happen once in a while. I found myself reaching for the popcorn probably a little more often than I normally would. My husband and I developed an interest in Scotch in the last few months, not to the point of being concerned, but, curiously investing in Scotch to try and taste. Watching movies, which I hadn't really given myself a lot of permission to do in the last couple of years. Life's been busy. Cuddling up with my kiddo and really appreciating bedtime in a different kind of way. These are some of the things that I've taken on, and they've been a wide array. Some are probably things I would put in the healthier choices than others, but they all are what they are. Another strategy my body has kind of gone into is hanging on to excess weight. That's a strategy my body is using in its survival state. As frustrating as it may be, yoga pants are my best friend these days. And I'm aware, I'm super aware, and this is where the self-compassion kicks in. I'm aware that as things start to trickle down, as I gain capacity and start using different kinds of tools, then my body, I can actually send different messages to my body to allow it to settle. But it's a practice. And we're still not on the other side of things. So there's still a tremendous amount of anxiety and stress and stuff happening all around us. And so this may just be the way things are for a while, and there's an element of radical acceptance in all of that. That's probably a new strategy for me. I'm not so good with radical acceptance in some ways.
Michelle, I'm just scrolling through the chat, and there's some great
Yeah, please.
conversation there.
Awesome.
People talking about, family time, a little me time every morning, yoga, meditation, journaling are some of the great positives. Some of the, I had put not so positives in the chat. So things like too much phone time or random shopping, maybe just staying so busy, because that can be easier than actually having the downtime to have to process or cope maybe with those moments. So there's just lots of conversation in there that I thought was really helpful to share for folks, because I think when you say strategies in this, very sophisticated system, immediately we're all thinking, oh gosh, what should I have? Maybe I don't have that. And then when you share the reality, it's we're all
a wide array.
Yes. We're in the same storm but different boats, but they have similar amenities by the looks of it.
Absolutely, and the air quote around the sophisticated management system is that our kids are way plainer about things than we are sometimes. I look at my 7-year-old and she's having a meltdown, or she's hiding under the table, and I'm like, yes, that's exactly how I'm feeling. Can I get in there with you? But yet we don't. We hold it together and scroll through Facebook for far too long, or order a silly board game on Amazon, or whatever it might be. There's our sophistication of our management systems just means we're probably less likely talking about how we're actually feeling and doing things that maybe align really well with it, and more likely doing things that have just become habitual, or they're numbing tools. Some of us are, and it doesn't mean that we're doing all those things all the time either. And it's less about positive coping and negative coping and more about, let's just call it coping, and acknowledge that this is what survival looks like, and it's messy, and it's real, and it's human, and it actually makes a whole lot of sense. Frustrating, confusing, but it actually makes a whole lot of sense. I'm going to apologize for this graphic. I've yet to create a variation on this that works for me, so I have it in a couple of different forms. I don't love it, but it gives us a little bit of sense. Lots of us have heard about fight, flight, and freeze. Lots of us have heard about, and if you've been around the military to have the R2MR mental health training, they have, the spectrum of stuff, and you've heard of these things in a million different ways. But we forget that sometimes that this is actually just a natural thing for our body to do, and that it can do this and needs to do this in order to stay alive. That this actually exists in our body for a very, very good reason. And so this little chart will just kind of help us talk a little bit about what's happening in our systems and why we're choosing sometimes the things we're choosing, or why we're struggling in certain areas that we're struggling, whether we're aware of it or not, and why connection is maybe sometimes a challenge. So as you're looking at your screen there, the bottom level of that is social engagement, and I'm going to talk about the ventral vagal system, or the nervous system, in a slightly different, sort of more physiological kind of way. We know that the nervous system, lots of us know that the nervous system kind of gets controlled by the base of the brain. It's a very primal part of our body. But in fact, the vagus nerves actually run through lots of parts of our body. And one of the predominant ones kind of ends in our gut. It's linked to this idea of gut feeling, right? You have this gut feeling of what's going on. They're very sensitive, they're very aware, and they need to be, because this is our survival system in our body. It is the oldest part of our body, and it's the first thing that comes online as we are created. This ventral vagal, this bottom piece, is in fact when our nervous systems are calm, when our nervous systems are settled, when we have a feeling of being present and relaxed. It doesn't mean we're sitting on the couch with a cup of tea and scrolling through our phone. That's actually a little bit of activation. It means we're present, we're in our body, and we're calm. This is the optimal place for connectivity, this sense of feeling connected to another person. This is where we're more likely to accurately read body language and cues from partners, children, friends, family. This is when we are right here, right now, and not, making a mental grocery list, thinking about the 15 things you got to do before bed, carrying all that mental load that many of us carry and are constantly kind of flipping through like a book all the time. Did I get this done? I flip back to this one. All those pieces we move through. Presence and being present means I'm just here. I'm just here right now. This is the optimal place in this place of calm for connection. I'm probably going to say that a few more times, but I'm going to come back to that. As we have an alarm clock go off in the morning, our body starts to hit some level of activation. It moves into that sympathetic charge. We need activation to be able to get up, get ready for work, get dressed, get the kids out the door, get groceries, plan for things, get through the daily activities. We need some sympathetic charge in the body. But when we are in a good rhythm and our body is less in a hypercharged state, we are moving sort of fluidly between sort of this yellow and green place, if we could imagine. It's sort of like a little calm wave. We're moving between yellow and green, and we're kind of, having moments of activation and able to find a calm state, at different points throughout our day. This is when our system is working optimally. Our body's working optimally. It doesn't need to hang on to things to survive. It's not feeling threatened. As we move up in that nervous system into the higher states of that fight-flight response, we might start noticing things like a shorter fuse, or avoidant behaviors. Procrastination becomes a little more significant. We might notice avoiding conflict. We might notice wanting conflict. We might find ourselves a little more irritable. That's when the chewing really drives me nutty, as we're kind of moving up into those higher reaching places. This is when we maybe haven't had a chance to discharge the system, and we've been just kind of holding on to stress, holding on to stress, holding on to stress, and it's kind of building in our body. As it builds, it can hit a threshold where it moves into a place beyond fight and flight, where it moves into a place of freeze. And freeze is when we sometimes can't move. Freeze is the oldest part of our nervous system. It is, if you could imagine, like in an animal, it's like when it plays dead. And after a traumatic situation, animals will freeze because their body is in full conservation mode. It is optimally targeted to just conserve what energy we've got. As it moves up into sympathetic, our bodies are really activated. As our bodies are really activated, it takes a ton of energy to manage that and maintain that. Eventually, the body gets tired and moves into freeze for rest. It does that on purpose. Ultimately, if we are living in freeze for prolonged periods of time, we might be experiencing things like hopelessness, helplessness, depression, feeling trapped, feeling stuck. People will often talk about, I feel kind of stuck. I'm stuck in a rut. I can't get motivated. I can't get it in my own way to do some things. I'm so far behind, and the anxiety over these pieces I've left behind is driving me nuts, but I literally cannot get it done. That's freeze. And freeze, as I said, is just a normal part of what our body does. If we are existing in freeze for prolonged periods of time, it absolutely impacts our mental well-being. We can pass through freeze in an intense kind of stressful situation and deactivate, coming back down with the use of that ventral vagal system. We can come down and actually have a sense of calm again, but lots of us avoid it. not on purpose. We're not purposefully, avoiding this release that our nervous system needs to do. But lots of us have never been taught about it. Many of us are just using our sophisticated management systems. So if I'm feeling really in a high sympathetic charge, and I'm feeling like I'm really overloaded, I have huge anxiety, you know what, I'm just going to get on my phone and leave me alone for the next 2 hours. I just need to check out. Or I'm really agitated and every little thing throws me off, and then I'm needing some support to go to sleep, but then I'm getting up the next day and I'm carrying on. Or I'm super busy and the flight looks like I've got a million things on my to-do list and it never ends, and I'm go, 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 go. These are sophisticated management systems that are helping us cope with what our nervous system is doing without actually getting to a place of deactivation. Because deactivation requires us to slow down and pay attention to what's happening in our body. And one, that's scary. Two, I don't know how to do that. That can be something that we get really, wondering, what does that even look like? What is she talking about? Three, it can be, I can't take that on by myself. That feels too huge. I don't know what would happen if I stopped, doing the floors, getting up in the morning and making sure I do 3 loads of laundry every day and doing this and this. And if I stop that, what's going to happen? And it's actually fear that perpetuates the strategies we use sometimes. This is all, again, information to take in with kindness and curiosity and go, what's actually happening in there? Where am I? How am I doing right now? Am I feeling a little agitated because I'm sitting still too long? Do I need to get up and move? Then move. It's okay to do that. Are you feeling like I really need a blanket right now? That's okay. Go get a blanket. Are you sitting there wondering, how come I didn't have a bigger lunch? Now I'm starving, or I really need that popcorn. I'm a popcorn lover, not a chocolate lover, a popcorn lover. I need that popcorn that's in the fridge or in the pantry. Do what you need to do right now. And listen with curiosity. Because what I'm talking about are things that all of us struggle with. And many of us don't even have this awareness of, you mean I can actually let that out of my body? I don't have to carry all of that? Or we're watching this play out in our partners and wondering, like, why have they been so freaking angry lately? They short fuse. Or how come my kids are at each other all the time? Is it just because they've been in the house too long? Are we not getting out enough? Or what happens to me when I come home from a grocery shopping trip? Why am I so agitated when I get home and need a nap? What's wrong with me is where lots of us go. And what it actually is that in the last many months, if we were already maybe in some of that sympathetic charge and having a hard time we were coping and getting along and doing okay, and now this kind of popped in, for some of us, it tipped the scale. We might have found ourselves in moments of freeze. We might have found ourselves with a couple of days when all we did was cry, or where we feel fear where maybe we didn't before, or maybe we're managing the information that comes in at us because it's too anxiety evoking. There's lots of ways that this is showing up for us in very real ways, because there actually is threat in our environment. It's not imagined. It's real. And you can actually get comfortable enough in your own body to recognize what's happening, be curious about what's happening, and find ways to experience a deactivation of this system, even to the point of maybe being able to support the people in your world who are closest to you once you've practiced some of these things on your own. Before I keep moving, are there any burning questions? And I see there's stuff kind of happening there, Michelle. Are there any burning questions from anybody before I keep popping on to the next slide.
We'll give people just a minute to sort of chime in the chat or to come on if they have a question, but I'm just seeing lots of good conversation about people sort of affirming the things that you're saying, like, yes, coping is coping, there's not good or bad, or recognition and awareness is important for self-compassion. You know, I think it's just resonating with folks in a way that maybe, hopefully, is sparking curiosity.
Good. Hopefully it's not panic. We don't need any more.
We'll hope that the silence is positive, is positive curiosity. But yeah, type those things in the chat, and I can certainly float them up to Michelle as well.
Awesome, awesome. Let's keep tracking then. I saw some people saying I'm making notes. There are probably some other slides that might look a little easier, and I will invite you, if there's anyone at the end who is wanting a little more information or more resources or have other questions, by all means, you can look us up online and fire off an email, and I will absolutely respond. If you, well, I'll know when it's coming in anyway, but if you tag it with that you attended the MFS workshop today, I'll be happy to send something along. So don't stress about notes. I'll fire that along if you need it. So what do these things kind of look like? So let's talk about them in a little more discrete kind of way. And fight, if we sort of think about, you know, not just the people around us, but the communities around us. This has been everywhere. We have seen riots and rallies and distress and angst and intensity of our communities happening around us. This is where they are in their nervous system. This is a human response to heightened states of stress load in the body, of a sense of threat. And we might see angry outbursts. We might see more kind of controlling behaviors. We might see an inflexibility. Remember, we're supposed to pivot? Yeah, right. Pivoting and being flexible and all those good things, that's great if you're in the green zone. If you're in this state of calm or low levels of sympathetic charge, we have lots more capacity for change, which, you know, as a military family, that's a requirement, right? So this awareness that it's a little bit harder for us might help around that self-compassion. We might see lying or blaming. Not that any of us have seen that in the news lately. We might see demanding behaviors or inflexibility. You know, there might be this sort of change in routine our kids are really, you know, kind of pulling toward, or we might find ourselves really stuck in a rut of doing things in a particular kind of way. An inability to concentrate. You know, focus is very much happens in our calm state. So if we're not in our calm state, man, that's going to be a really hard thing to get to. Frustration over little things, super short fuse. Yeah, no kidding, right? In our bodies, there's this flood of adrenaline and cortisol, and if we're in a heightened state on a regular basis, our body is managing and metabolizing that on a regular basis. Muscle tension, sore back and neck. You know, I don't know if anyone else has had a moment where they're like, I can't move my neck, or I really need a good massage. We might feel more tension along the spine, right? These are all responses to that sympathetic nervous system kicking into gear. And there's also this sense of the whole world is threatening. It may even be that we interpret faces in a more angry kind of way or a threatening kind of way. It might be that, you know, we're someone who never responds to anything online in kind of a knee-jerk way, and all of a sudden we find ourselves doing that. And afterward, as we settle, maybe we go, oh, darn, I shouldn't have done that, or I wish I hadn't. You know, this is coming from this heightened state of nervous system. Flight might look like this strong desire to run away, like my want to go to some secluded cottage by myself with no cell phone or internet service for a prolonged period of time. It's a total fantasy. Like, I don't need a beach. I don't need a pool. I just need me some woods and a cabin and some wood to burn, and I'm good to go. Some food, done. And it's not that I don't love my family. And so I'm very gentle with myself around these, or I'm not going to run away. But if I could for a little while, I would. Yeah, of course I want to do that, right? It's like we've been sitting on this intense flame for months. I want to get away. I want it to ease. I want it to settle. I want to take a pause. Sometimes flight looks like that overly busy. We talked about that, the go, 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 right? And, you know, I've seen those kinds of patterns pop up in people who are, you know, dealing with grief and then an inability to have closure because some of our rituals aren't possible right now. When we have big emotion that we're not really sure what to do with. You know, when we go, 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 it allows us to refocus that energy that our body has brought into play, because fight, flight isn't activation. It allows us to burn it off in a different kind of way. You know, some folks will say, you know, when I get charged up and super anxious, I just got to go out and do yard work. And that's all that helps me, because I can burn it off. And what we're doing in those times is pushing our bodies to wear down that that charge in our body. We might see in our kids or in us this sort of need to be first. You know, it seems irrational, or you know, those board games we're playing, the meltdown over not winning. Flight can look like avoiding tasks and activities. You know, the to-do list has gotten longer, or you know, there's really something I need to be doing, and I'm just not getting there. Hyperactivity, silliness, loud and disruptive. You know, you might be seeing this around you. If you're a teacher these days, I've had lots of conversations with educators in our community. Sometimes it just goes right sideways, and again, it's not because the teacher doesn't have a sense of control over a class. It's that their nervous systems are vibrating at a higher frequency than maybe they were before. Anxiety is part of flight. It's frenzied. This, you know, breaking into a sweat, feeling like we're running in a million different directions, feeling overwhelmed by what's on our plate. Or if one more thing comes in, or there's a slight change in the morning routine, like we have a dentist appointment instead of going to daycare for drop-off, you know, that might throw us into this state of agitation. That's an indicator of where we are in our nervous system. Freeze looks more like a disinterest. Maybe not interested in anything we used to do before, or even the things that bring us joy. Not interested in or having the attention span to watch a program on TV. Not interested in reading, or not interested in doing some of the creative things that, you know, maybe we did prior to what's been happening. We might feel confused or forgetful. Now, this isn't, you know, I went upstairs with 50 things on my mind and I happened to drop one of those balls. This means, you know, I had one thing on my mind, I went into a room and completely forgot what I was doing. Or I have 3 things I really need to remember today to do because they're really important, and they include, you know, finances, medical stuff, or whatever, and I can't even hang on to it long enough to get through those tasks. We might find ourselves a little more spacey or daydreamy. We might find ourselves a little more clumsy. Sometimes that's an easier one to see in children, although in adults too, you're running into walls, or dropping things, or burning your hand in the kitchen. We might find ourselves more alone or withdrawn. can't self-motivate. I can't get out of my own way to do the things I know I need to be doing. There's a lot of shame that comes for people when we're in a state of freeze, when our body is in that state of distress, that's the way it's coping with that charge. And depression, that's where depression lives. Stress overload in our body means that we experience a different kind of pain. Activities that might not have been painful before are painful now, because our body, in a heightened state of survival, wants us to know these things that could be dangerous. Right? If we think about it as, this is just my body responding to a threat and feeling like it needs to survive, it is going to help me survive. But it's confusing sometimes. You might find yourself having more aches and pains in your joints. You might find yourself struggling to lift things or to do things you might have done more easily before. You might find yourself actually hanging on to a little bit of excess pain after a workout that maybe you didn't have before. Poor cognitive performance. Man, that's really frustrating. And when we first went back, I acutely experienced this in September. I did my first talk that I had done since everything the world shut down, I talk about. And I love to do talks. I love to talk to groups of people. I love the energy. I love the engagement, the feedback. It's way harder virtually, but I love that opportunity to connect with people in that kind of way. And I was standing up in front of a group of teachers the Friday before they were going back to school, and I had brought a bunch of materials knowing I'd probably get through a tiny little piece of it. But I found myself shaking on the inside. My hands were shaking. I found myself struggling to search for words, which is not typical for me either. And it was all I could do the entire time, not to sort of beat myself up about this lack of what I expected from my brain. I expected myself to be able to be on the fly a little easier. But sometimes when we are on overload, our cognitive performance isn't as important. Our thinking brain, this higher order thinking piece, isn't even online. All of our energy is in this back part of our brain, this primal brain, in fight, flight, or freeze. It's really just wanting us to survive. Screw the thought and complex problem solving. We don't need to do that. It has gotten easier over this fall, and I've found a whole bunch of really incredible tools that have made that a whole lot easier for me, and grown, I think, a tremendous amount, which is, I promise, the upside to all of this intensity. But poor cognitive performance can be incredibly frustrating when we just can't live up to what we thought we should. Another message I've heard from folks too is that, I don't have the get up and go. So I can be tired, but then I can kind of pull on this burst. I can pull on this little bit of burst to get through something I need to do. And that burst just isn't there in the same way it used to be, because the body has actually created a state of fatigue. Those chemicals, those hormones in our body are tired. They're just not giving us that little burst or dose to be able to push through a tough task. And the antidote is not to push harder or to beat ourselves up about that. It's to go, well, that was interesting. What was that about? What do I need to be doing for myself right now? How do I carve out some time today? Because clearly my body is sending me a super clear message that I am tired. And how do I do that long enough to actually have some sustained shift? Digestive problems might be something that you've experienced or have in the past. Again, that vagus nerve ends in our gut. And so if we think about that, if we're stressed, the gut really doesn't need to do a lot. What needs to work is all of those automatic responses. Our heart needs to beat, blood needs to pump, we need to breathe, and we need to be able to move fast. So digesting what you ate for supper might not be top priority. And so there can be lots of digestive problems that we kind of notice that comes along with that. It's another indicator that our body is a little offline, or it's up in those higher reaches of our nervous system. Physical recovery takes longer. I think I've talked a little bit about that. Relationships are harder because we're tired. We're having difficulty, that should be cues, not cures, reading cues appropriately. We're struggling to, I don't know how many times my husband and I have had regular miscommunication, and we're pretty effective communicators. Not always, like any couple, but we're pretty effective communicators. But there's this sort of, are you mad? What's going on with you? How come you're frustrated? Like, relax. There's been lots of misreading a tone of voice, or misreading the expression on their face. Again, it's an indicator that our survival system is very much engaged. You have a limited overall energy. We might find it harder to sleep at night. We're waking more. We're feeling more anxious. We're avoiding work because it's friggin' frustrating, massive brain fog. And sometimes we're really upset with ourselves about those kinds of things. We might find ourselves reacting to stuff versus responding. And what I mean by that is that it's a knee-jerk. I'm not even thinking, I'm just reacting in the moment, versus a contemplative response. Do I really want to say that? What does this person need from me? How can I not react to what it is I think I'm seeing, and take a step back and go, ooh, you're having a hard time. Let's just take a breath. And man, my kids, this reacting versus responding, they've dealt with an awful lot of that from me in the last few months. And poor sleep, we've talked about that already. So when we have I know there's a traumatic event here at the far left side of this picture. This is another version of the nervous system. It doesn't necessarily need to be a single incident trauma. We are living in the middle of a trauma every day, right now. But our bodies know what to do. And I think it was Joanna at the beginning, before people started coming on, she said, but lots of good things have happened too. Absolutely lots of good things have happened. Man, out of the traumas our cultures and ancestors and we've experienced around us, we have all kinds of capacity for traumatic growth, and ability to grow and change and learn and adapt. But first, we need to be able to settle out enough to have moments where we can take it in. If we are living, if you can imagine, in a state of freeze, or in a higher state of that sympathetic system, in a higher state of fight-flight, it's going to be very hard to take on new things, change, be curious, question stuff. Be flexible enough to try something outside of the box, let alone create something outside of the box. And so what this is actually showing us here is what it's like to be stuck on in that sympathetic charge. And we might see, and this is again another repetition of what we saw before: anxiety, panic, hyperactivity, exaggerated startle, an inability to relax, restlessness, emotional flooding. Those are some pieces we might see in that on state. In that off state, we might experience that flat affect, deadness, exhaustion, chronic fatigue, disorientation, disconnection, dissociation. Dissociation is when we're not even really fully present in our own bodies. And that can happen. Again, these are tools our body has to keep us alive. But if we are dealing with an acute stress or prolonged accumulation of major stresses, our body can kind of move into these places or move through these places, without us even really being aware of what's going on. We just might be feeling the frustration with our bodies, what it's doing, or our brain being foggy. We might notice other symptoms without sort of thinking about the underlying cause of those things. And so this is kind of what happens to our brain. If you can imagine this little pyramid dude is our brain, and the cognition is our thinking and our capacity for problem solving and getting our head around complex things. And the survival is that lower part of our brain, the fight, flight, freeze, that nervous system part. When we are in a significant state of stress or distress, we are spending a huge amount of our energy just managing that survival load and not a lot in the cognition. And so when I'm talking to educators in particular, I talk about, if you can imagine in your classroom, if you've got a kiddo who's really in survival mode, their learning capacity is radically different. And it's not that different for us. If we want to be able to take on tasks at work, to plan, maybe you're planning a move, maybe you're navigating a new place you've just landed in this last year, maybe you're navigating your partner away a lot and extra stress, you're homeschooling your kids. You need to have thinking power to do that. But if we are in our survival state a lot, and it's using up a lot of our life energy, it's hard to be able to do that. It's really hard to have the energy to be able to get to those places. And so all the kindness on ourselves and on our bodies, when it falls a little short of what we're hoping it will do. I love this quote because it is so true, and every time my husband and I argue over something silly, I think about it, because we really don't see things as they are. We see things from our own place. We see things as we are. We experience the world as a threat if we ourselves are feeling threatened. We experience conversation as, overwhelming if we ourselves are overwhelmed. And so always, our biggest asset and our biggest tool in our toolbox is continually working on this journey of self-awareness. And self-awareness beyond just maybe some of our patterns we really don't want to keep doing, but self-awareness on what does that actually even feel like in my body? Because I've talked a lot about behaviors, I've talked a lot about the things we can see on the outside of what that stress system looks like. But are you aware of what it feels like on the inside? What does it feel like when I'm feeling activated? How do I know? How do I know if I'm deep in a place of anger? Am I aware of the flushed face? Am I aware of my racing heart? Am I aware of maybe I start sweating a little bit? Do I know what these sensations feel like? Do I know what I'm feeling when I'm reaching for my phone to zone out, to the point that my husband's saying, hello, we're over here. What am I noticing in my body in those moments? What's my body trying to communicate that I'm trying to shut out in those moments? And as we grow in our own self-awareness, we then have greater capacity to be able to see things in a different kind of way, to be able to see things a little more clearly, because now I understand where I am, so maybe I'll be able to see a little better where you are. And the greatest challenge really is that we need to get out of our heads and into our bodies. Our bodies know how to release these stress loads. And that wisdom somehow has been lost for many of us. If you do yoga regularly, or you practice breathing exercises, or you do meditation, or other kind of body experiences, you might have much more physical awareness of what's happening in your body. But for many of us, that's not a part of our daily practice. And so we're constantly trying to think our way through what's going on. Like, you know, when I'm out shopping and I'm feeling that little bit of anxiety or charge going on, you know, I can't think myself out of that. I can't go, well, this is ridiculous, Michelle. You know, you're taking all the precautions. You know what you need to do. You got your mask on. It's a clean mask. You're good to go. You know, you're going to use a hand sanitizer. You're going to keep your distance even if other people don't. Or, you know, you can't talk yourself out of a stress response. It's your body's way of managing. What you can do, though, is recognize what that feels like in the body and actually systematically find ways to allow it to release.
Okay, Michelle, I have a question that I think maybe a few folks might be thinking around this, which is how do we start to evaluate what tools can we use? Because what I'm hearing is that this is all very individual, obviously. And so we need to be really looking inward and with self-compassion, obviously, as well. But what are some of the strategies folks can use specifically as places to start that recognition piece so that we can understand our bodies, how our bodies are reacting when we're activated, and how we can teach ourselves new strategies to help move through or be okay in these moments?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we're going to do in the next few slides. That's a lovely segue.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not all gloom and doom, I promise. But it has to begin with the stuff that we can see and that many of us can relate to. And then we move inward to the place that's for some of us is uncharted territory. It's the internal sensations. And that's the next few slides. So what we're going to do, and again, remember this is an invitation. No one's going to know what you are or you are not doing in your own spaces. If you need to take a break, you can take a break and step back and come back. Do what you need to do over the next few pieces. We're going to actually move through some exercises that's going to help you to start to get curious about what it is I am feeling. And are there some things that I might actually enjoy that feel good that might work to support my nervous system to have that actual discharge versus coping in other kinds of ways. So it really was a perfect bridge because this is the first one. I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to shift myself a little bit because I'm finding my foot's going to sleep, and this reminded me that I should be paying attention to that. We're just going to try a little exercise called orienting, and it may sound really simple, but again, what we're working toward are those things that allow us to be present, to allow us to send a signal to our body that we're safe and that it's okay to be calm in this moment, that we can just be here and in our bodies. And that, you know, nothing bad is going to happen in the next few minutes as we're playing around with things. And so orienting is literally just that. It's noticing the chair you're sitting in or the bed you're lying in or the couch you're on, wherever it might be. You could be on a yoga mat on the floor. It's noticing what's supporting you. Taking a look around the room that you're in, and just looking at all the things there are to see. And even just noticing, how does my neck feel as it moves? And where do my eyes actually want to rest? What's something in my environment pleasant to look at? And one of the things I come back to often for me is this row of books next to me. There's something very pleasing to me about that and the books I've chosen to be on this shelf. And just noticing, slowing down. It's okay if you find these exercises frustrating. Again, it might just be an indicator it's kind of hard to slow down. And that's okay too. It's just where we are. And as you're kind of noticing the room, we're going to try this next one. And if you can imagine that when we are really stressed and, in a really heightened state, we've all heard of tunnel vision, that our vision actually narrows very acutely so that we can focus very specifically on something in particular. And this exercise is taking a look at something in our environment that we like to look at, or even just a neutral thing to look at. I'm kind of noticing out the patio door, the birch tree in my neighbor's yard. And as I'm looking at that, I'm just going to let my eyes soften. That might mean that the image kind of blurs a little bit in front of you, that we kind of pay attention to the muscles around our eyes, and maybe you want to squint them even, and then just kind of notice, oh yeah, I kind of got a twitch there, or what's happening for my eyes. Just let them kind of blur out a little bit. And as you're doing that, increasingly bring your awareness to the things in your peripheral. What can you notice as your eyes are gazing forward that's on either side of your body? Just letting yourself take a moment and a breath, experimenting with this one. Without changing your posture a whole lot, we're going to try a couple more similar kinds of experiences that are very much intended to slow the body down and help us to be in the moment. And one of these is what we call a butterfly hug. And a butterfly hug is really simple. Let me see if I can tilt my screen. And I hope you can see me clearly enough. I'll describe it. We're just putting one arm over the other, and you can cross your arms. You can have your arms across your body so that your left hand is on your right leg and your right hand is on your left leg, wherever it feels comfortable to you. And all we're going to do is just alternating hands tap for 25 counts. So it would literally be right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, and just count to 25. And then let yourself take a big breath. And out. Just notice whatever it is that's happening in your body. Might be some flopping around in your belly going on, or some tightness in your chest, or thoughts swirling around in your head. That's okay. You're just where you are. And we're going to try it one more time. So right, left, in whichever order makes sense for you, 25 times. And a deep breath. And out. Just notice, is there a difference from where you started this activity? And it's okay if it's really hard to notice anything. We're just playing around. Now, if you're in a position where you can put your feet flat on the floor, if not, if you're kind of laying down, you can kind of put your feet up, bend your knees and kind of put your feet up. I'm going to get you to experiment with what it feels like really paying attention and drawing your awareness to your feet on the floor. And just noticing as your feet are on the floor, what it feels like under your feet. Which part of your foot has the most contact with the floor? Does one foot feel a little heavier than the other? And just in this activity, we're just exploring the moment and the position we're in, and the support that whatever it is under your feet is providing you right now. My left one's feeling heavier today. Plugging in is a simple one. It's putting your fingertips together, little 10, and then just putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth and just breathing. And just noticing the breath and the rhythm of it going in and out. I've done this a few times in yoga and it's lovely. There's no magic length of time for any of these activities. I hope you're exploring and seeing which ones feel good, and I'm sure there will be pieces that stand out for folks that feel better than others. Maybe make a note for that on your resource list as a tool you can kind of come back to as a way to slow down if you notice yourself really speeding up. The counting to 10 exercise is kind of fun. It's a bit like I Spy in some kind of way. It's great to do with kids too. And it's amazing what this particular activity can do if we're really feeling like we're having an anxious moment. It's one I give a lot of my youth to do as well. Not just youth, adults as well. It can work really well when we're really activated because it's a little more tangible than some of the others. So in your environment, counting to 10 is really just referring to looking around your space and counting, for example, 10 red things. It could be counting 10 soft things. It could be counting 10 boxes. It could be counting 10 books. It could be counting 10 CDs. It could be counting 10 pairs of shoes or socks, which are all over my floor upstairs because my little one hates keeping them on. Whatever it might be, just taking a moment and counting 10. And then just notice. Notice what's happening on the inside. Are you feeling any slower? Are you feeling more activated? Did you like that one? And you can do several rounds of that and then come back to the what am I noticing? Another kind of fun way as you're exploring with these things for yourself or your family is if you've got a smartwatch, they're really fun because they keep track of your heart rate. And it's kind of fun beforehand, before you do the grounding activity, to kind of see what your heart rate is. And then after you've done it, like, where am I at now? Or where was I at the beginning of training, and where am I at the end? It's a lot of fun to kind of play around. doing these kinds of things don't have to be a chore. They can actually be fun and funny and playful, and it's okay to do that and to be silly with it. The slow exhale is just as it sounds. It's that we take a deep breath in, but that we are very slow and intentional about that breath being out. And in case you haven't sort of figured, when our system is activated, it's rushed, it's busy, it's fast. And when we are doing a slow exhale, we are actually telling our nervous system, it's okay. I'm okay. We are okay. It's okay to slow down. So if you want to give it a try, just take a deep breath in when you're ready. And I always breathe in through my nose and then out through your mouth. Deep breath in. Slow breath out. And then just notice. Not the phone that's ringing in the background. The fun times of working from home. Just note to yourself which one felt the best. This slide talks a little bit about what discharging our nervous system feels like, looks like, how we know if we've done this. And some of you may have actually noticed some of these things happening to you as we were doing the activity. You might have found yourself yawning a little bit. I love it when clients start yawning in the middle of sessions. They all get embarrassed. But for me, it's a sign that we've slowed down enough to signal to the nervous system that it can just relax. It can truly slow down and maybe let go. And I actually have a story to go with this one. I was presenting at a local hospital, a children's hospital in our area, and I was so ramped up before I was traveling from the Valley up to Halifax. And I was really ramped up. It was talking to a group that I was really passionate about something that was very personal to me. And I was just zinging, and I could feel my system just totally revving. And I just started really kind of noticing what was happening in my body and where I was feeling it. Now, prior to this, I've also done some of my own work in this particular process of discharging the nervous system with my own therapist. Every good therapist should have a therapist. That's just a rule. And so, and this year, more than any, I think we need our own support. And so we had been doing some work, and all of a sudden I started having these huge, like, whole upper body kind of tension yawns. And by the time I got where I was going, I was so calm. I don't think I've ever been that calm prior to a training. My body had just freshly come through this process with my therapist, and it was so primed that I just yawned and yawned and yawned and yawned about, like, I'm sure 15 to 20 times. And by the time I got there, I was settled. So much so that the fact that I was using WebEx, didn't have my presentation on a memory stick, couldn't get the memory stick to work on my computer, didn't send me over the edge. Prior to the presentation, I actually was able to just stay in my zone. And it was like this light bulb went off, and, it's amazing when you can use the same tools with so much success. And I loved learning new things. I've been in this field for such a long time. I love it when something opens up so clearly like this. And for my trauma clients, this has been such a revelation because they haven't had to get into the story. We don't have to talk about the story. We can just stay with our body's sensations. Some of the other ways discharge kind of shows up is a warm sweat, gurgly bellies. So if your belly kind of came online again, right? Because remember, it goes offline when we're stressed. It comes online and bellies start growling. That's a good indicator. It doesn't just mean that you're hungry. It means it's actively digesting, which is really cool. You might feel a shaking sensation in your core, in your limbs. You might have sort of that deep, spontaneous breath, like but it's not forced. It just comes up, and you just kind of have to take that breath. That's another discharge of the nervous system. It can feel like a hot flash. Been having more of those these days. 45 brought a whole new realm of different things. A heat wave can feel like a hot flash, and it can feel like this flash of heat happening, and then all of a sudden cool. And that's your nervous system discharging. Not just coming down, but discharging the stress that it was holding. And cool sensations like goosebumps, tingling kinds of sensations. When I experience these things for myself, I kind of describe it as sort of like my skin is off-gassing. It's almost like there's something evaporating from it, or my palms will get sort of warm or tingly. These are all indicators, again, that our nervous system is settling and that it's discharging that stress. So let's get curious. I see somebody yawned. That's awesome. I hope you have more yawns. Let's play around a little bit. And if you're curious about what's going on in there and whether or not you can experience a little bit of that discharge, we're not forcing it. Everybody's going to be in a different place today. You may or may not have the safety in your environment. I don't mean safety like you're under threat. I mean, you may have kids or have an ear out to something else or having to pay attention for the beep on whatever to go off. It's okay wherever you are in whatever way you want to explore. So the invitation is just to notice the sensations within your body. What are you feeling right now? What sensation is happening? Are you feeling a heaviness? Are you feeling heat? Cool? Cold? Maybe a headache? Maybe a tightness somewhere? And remembering some of our grounding tools we've already used, like noticing our feet, counting to 10 around the room. Just kind of noticing those sensations, and if you're able to stay with them even for a few moments, just seeing what happens. Are those sensations changing? Is that pressure traveling? Changing temperature? Changing shape? Changing intensity? It's okay if it's staying the same. Come back into your space a little bit. Maybe notice your feet on the floor. And then back into the body. We don't need to force a discharge. With practice, discharge experiences will happen. There is no magic. Your body knows how to do this. It's pretty freaking awesome. It's just giving your body space, time, an invitation, being curious instead of analyzing. What is this? What's this left over from? How come I'm feeling so anxious? I must be thinking about blah, 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 blah. Just staying with the body's sensations. That analysis part's hard for me. I want to analyze everything. But just staying with that sensation to notice what's going on. Will allow your body to release. And in this time that we have today, it's going to feel a little more rushed than it would if we were maybe making the time for ourselves. But what you might notice is just that tightness that was here now feels a little bit more like it's in my belly. Or it kind of felt like it moved up into my throat a little. Or my headache shifted to the other side. Or you might go, you know what, I'm paying attention to that lump in my throat and it's not going anywhere. That's okay. The more we check in with the body and notice without judging those sensations, without fear of those sensations, and manage it, the intensity, by maybe coming back out into those grounding exercises, back into the body, going out and coming in, the more we trust our body's capacity to release and discharge, the easier this will be. And it may be that there's some really big stuff stuck there too. And so instead of paying attention to all 15 things that are going on, we just pick one. And if we're feeling overwhelmed, we come back to grounding. Maybe it's breath and the slow breath out. Maybe it's the counting 10 objects in our environment. Maybe we're cold and I just need a blankie. When I do this for myself, I put another pillow right here if I'm in this chair, and I kind of like squish myself in and I have a blanket over top. And it's just enough tucking to sort of feel snug. And that provides me with enough support to be able to follow through on this particular exercise. Sometimes what comes up for us is emotions. And a reminder here that, emotion can feel intense and it can feel overwhelming. But when we make time and space for emotion, it ends. The same way sensations in our body can end. But again, we need to make time and space for that to be able to happen. Our body has lots of wisdom. Learning to trust it, though, can be challenging. I'm not going to ask these questions to the group unless people are really burning to want to answer those questions, and that's okay. I think we have about a half an hour left anyway. We can. There's a couple of slides left, but like I said, we don't need to rush through things. What was it like to try those things? Was it frustrating? Was it nice to have a little bit of time, even 15 minutes, to kind of try some new things? What would make that experience feel more supported? Would it have been a blanket or, a hot water bottle or a cup of tea, or, your essential oils on in your house? What about if you're outside? Maybe not here in the freezing rain, but wherever you are. What things feel good and soothing to your body? I love fuzzy socks. I've been working in my basement of my house for quite a few months now. Fuzzy socks have been a lifeline. Got them on right now. It's a must-have. Who fills your cup? Who fills you up? Who's your person that even just getting close to them in proximity, feels comforting? Their warmth next to you feels good. If you can conscript that person to join you in the exercise we just did and playing around with the body sensations, go for it. I like to do this with my kids sometimes, and with my little one, I'll bring her close, and if she's really feeling overwhelmed, she's learning how to describe, and it might just be, I feel big right here, and that's okay. And I just hold that space with her and bring her close to me, and the next thing I know, there's big yawns coming out, and she's releasing, because she doesn't need to hold on to this. Her body doesn't need this, right? And I'm her person, and Daddy too. So I'm the safe place for her to be able to just come down, stay with that sensation, and let it move through. And how do you connect? Resilience is a four-letter word for many of us, especially in the military community. I find it gets thrown at us a lot, that everything is about resilience, resilience, resilience. And, resiliency is not about plowing through, but for lots of us, it feels like that. It feels like, I just need to keep going. I just need to be able to get everything together. I just need to be able to whatever it is on your list. And it'll feel like that's the only way we're going to be resilient. I raise resilient kids by making sure that we keep going. We keep trucking. Crap doesn't get us down. We're survivors. We get through. But resilience is really not about personal toughness. It's not about sucking it up and carrying on. Resilience is about knowing we're not alone. Resilience is about how quickly we can recover from significant stress and trauma. And I find lots of times we just don't give people the tools to really even know what that means. What does that mean? What does it feel like to be calm? Especially with the military lifestyle, man, there's stresses everywhere all the time. And even just the not knowing what's happening, that you could make a plan and it's never going to happen, or the idea that you're, my parents always try to, get me to plan for vacation. And I'm like, what? Plan for vacation? Next year? No, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. Just those things keep our system in a state of activation, right? Resilience is about the capacity for connection to stay well. And that can only happen when we know how to actually equalize the body and to know what it feels like when it's in distress. The little handout, one of them that I gave you, was a resource list. And sometimes, we kind of go, well, like, I know I need to go for a walk, and I know that's what feels good, and I know that's what I want when I'm really stressed out, or, I know I like to have a warm bubble bath, or whatever it might be. But when we are really in those higher reaches of the nervous system, it can actually be really hard to remember those things, because remember that thinking part of the brain isn't super online. And so our resource list is so valuable to have, stick it on the fridge. Have one for every member of the family. Have everybody generate one. Sometimes the most challenging part is knowing, what feels good. What do I enjoy? What activities or people or what qualities about myself actually help me to feel settled? And just noting them down, whether it be now or when we're finished. These are some great pieces that calm the brainstem, which is that primal part we were talking about. That nervous system is in the brainstem. And the biggest piece of these things is that it's rhythmic. If you can imagine, I always think about, in the early days with my children, I did a lot of like the pat and sway. I still find myself swaying in lines if I'm trying to self-soothe, rocking. It's the rhythm of those things. And again, there's a reason babies like that. There's a reason we enjoy that sensation, is because that's soothing that primal part of our body. And so walking and dancing and running and drumming and tapping, that's the butterfly hug, and singing and breathing and movement and music are so soothing to the body. And I know I noticed some of that quiet music and walks in nature, meditation, those pieces. Those are lovely, and those are some of the resources people mentioned right off the hop. There's also some emotional ones, like this idea of forgiveness, acceptance, letting go, that can happen. Those are helpful. Gratitude, I love this Brene Brown definition, but mindfully practicing authenticity during your most soul-searching struggles is how we invite grace, joy, and gratitude into our lives. And man, I don't know of any time in my life that I have really had to dig deep around inviting some kind of grace with purpose, because I've never faced so many hard things all at once. I've had hard things. I've maybe even had bigger things on some level, but never so many, so fast, and lasting so long as what we're facing right now. And gratitude is about a practice of gratitude. I can be grateful for the things in my life, but if I'm actively practicing gratitude, and maybe that's, I'm putting myself in a grounding exercise and I'm settling down and I'm, jotting down in my journal 3 or 4 things that were just I feel incredibly blessed for today. That's an active practice of gratitude. And another piece we can add to a resource list. Another one I always like to bring up is this idea that we have lots of senses. And we don't just have 5, we have 8 senses. And those 8 senses are all things that we can actually use really nicely as tools to be able to settle our nervous system. We've used some of them already today, right? That's sight, using our visual cues, counting, smell. I have my own essential oil on. I have a really nice tea. Touch, your favorite pair of socks or whatever it might be, using some of those things as ways to seek comfort. Taste, cheesy popcorn all over it. Whatever it might be, that this is something that's soothing, Proprioception, vestibular, interoception are probably the 3 that are less familiar to most of us. And I'm just going to give a rudimentary definition. If there are any OTs in our group, you'd probably give a far better one than I. But if we think about proprioception is, where am I in space? And sometimes we can feel like we're free-falling. Sometimes we can feel like I just don't feel secure enough, or I don't have enough around me to kind of know where I am in space. We might see kids like running into walls or running into us, or just kind of figuring out, where am I? And so again, for me, I like to tuck in my pillows and my blanket. It just gives me that feedback of I'm cocooned in here. Other people, that is not how they like to experience that. Whatever works. Vestibular is about balance. Some people really like swinging. Some people really like experiences on carnival rides, where they have different kinds of experiences with those things. There's that phone again. And interoception is our capacity to be introspective, to be able to reflect on the inside and notice what's going on. And that's actually a sensation. That's a sense we have. And that's what we were practicing a little bit today when we were noticing what was happening on the inside. Hope is a combination of setting goals, having the tenacity and perseverance to pursue them, and believing in our own abilities. And man, again, I hope that today you walk away with some hope. I hope there are a couple of goals that you can pop on your list of things you might want to explore or try. And I hope that there's enough settling after slowing down and even listening for a couple of hours to be able to have enough energy to follow through. At the same time, I also know that when we are kind with ourselves and our limitations, we actually gain energy, life energy. When we release the nervous system, when we can make time to slow down, when we are kind with ourselves and all of our sophisticated management systems, it actually makes room in our systems and our bodies. Over Christmas, lots of us took a good chunk of time off at Christmas, and all of a sudden I had energy to, clean out the laundry room, and I did a couple other little deep jobs that I'd really wanted to do because I had enough life energy from rest and relaxation to be able to do those things. And how many of us beat ourselves up when we don't stay on top of that the rest of the time, right? So easy to do. And a reminder just that we need relationship like we need air. And if we are so stressed in our nervous systems that we are losing contact with those relationships, it needs to be a priority. We need to be somewhere on the top of that list so that we can get those needs met, so we can feel connection and closeness, so that we can feel like we are communicating in a way where we feel connected. Because our bodies need relationship. We are social beings. Take some time when we're all finished today and really explore, what felt good? What did you like? Are there things you're going to take home? You're probably already home. Are there things you're going to take with you into the rest of the week, or that you're gonna prioritize for yourself? Just one or two to play around with and experiment with. What are those things? Even just jotting them down on a sticky note, just as a little promise to yourself that that's something that you're going to give a go. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it, but I'm going to go to Michelle because we had talked a little bit about questions and whether or not you had some for me or there were some that came up from the group.
Yeah, no, this has been fantastic, and I know that we are, I think everybody, I can probably speak for most people to say, I think everybody's processing all of the amazing information you shared today, because I think what I was wondering most as I was listening was how much, that's not the best way to put that, but how often you've seen people forgetting that self-compassion piece as a first sort of cog in the wheel of continually moving forward. Because I think that that's, for me, when I've listened today, and feel free to share in the chat for others, but that's sometimes where we trip up.
Well, and as soon as we move down that shame lane, or we start getting after ourselves for, what is sometimes called maladaptive coping strategies, or, we sometimes call, our unhealthy choices. As soon as you move down that lane, it's a shame storm, right? It's where we get bogged down, and it makes it even that much harder to be able to sit with some of the tools that we've talked about today. This idea of being in the body, it doesn't need to be a place of analysis. It really doesn't need to be a cognitive place. We spend way too much time in our head.
That's so true.
Way too much time.
Absolutely. No, that's so true, and I think that sort of I was making some notes as we went, and I think I heard a lot of silent head nodding, but also just feedback in the chat about people having a few buzzwords over the past year that have been, I won't say triggering for them, but just have caused frustration. You mentioned pivot, but as military families, I laughed because when you came back to resilience, so many people in the chat mentioned how that's been a difficult term for them to manage lately, because while we should be or can be resilient, that need to, should ourselves consistently can be frustrating. So I think in a military family scenario, identifying that piece about resilience and what it should mean, or or could mean, as opposed to that four-letter word business that we kind of
Yeah.
attach it to.
And sometimes it's coming from, you know, well-intentioned folks who are really wanting people to be well. And it can feel like this, you know, we're a resilient bunch, you know, they're speaking for all of us, but in fact, they're probably struggling to even know what people need and how to meet those needs. And so if we tell you enough that you're resilient, you're going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is it's the leaders, the people, the folks around us who can slow down and say, yeah, it's been a shit show. Like, there's been a lot of stuff, and if you're not feeling good, if you're struggling with maybe a posting coming this year and what that's going to look like, man, no kidding.
Yeah.
It is not going to feel the same, and that's okay. You know, what do you need for support to be able to get through that? And I think that's the reality.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And then just I had asked in the chat just as you were finishing there, ironically to wrap up with the questions, but I sort of threw out there, what has everybody added to their toolbox of takeaways today? And a lot of people were citing the those techniques of slowing down, counting to 10, and those sort of moments of where we can be checking in with ourselves. So I really want to thank you for those, because I think we can, when people attend sessions like this, I think we're often in a headspace where we want the information, but sometimes we need those relative pieces, those toolbox moments that when we're in that heightened state or revved up a little bit, we can then go to that toolbox to say, here's what I needed out of that today. Find all of the purple pillows in my room, or find all of the whatever it is. So I really wanted to thank you for that.
Well, it was really important, I think, for me to include today actual moments of pause with intention, because we are always going, and you know, even when we're in a learning environment, we're activated.
Absolutely.
And so if this can just be a bit of a reset, maybe the next sessions will actually feel a little easier to take in.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a great transition. And so when you and I had spoke about doing this, that's why I loved the idea after you sort of came around to what you'd like to share with us, that this was a great way to start, because it's like cleansing the palate for the week and really allowing ourselves the space and capability to embrace the rest of the things that we're going to be talking about. So thank you again, Michelle, for joining us. And I'll just leave it for just a moment in case anybody has anything else they want to share.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are still on, who are joining our other sessions today, we do have a session coming up here in about 40 minutes with Bona, who's going to be talking about her journey to opening her podcast and how that's led her to a happiness journey. So I'm excited about that.